All right. So this is from the book Change Anything by Joseph Grenny. He's a co-author, actually. This is a great book for those who want to find out, like if you're stuck in a rut and you're trying to figure out how to break out of the rut or a plateau, or maybe you've just been trying to change for a long time and just don't know what it is that you need to do in order to, break through and, get that transformation that you've been wanting to get all along. Now, one of the main things you'll see at the beginning of the book is they're really going to emphasize that most people believe that the way that they're going to get results is through one, willpower. So they may say, well, if I just had more willpower, I'd finally be able to, get the results that I want. Or you may hear them say, well, this is another very common one, is that it has to do with motivation. Like if I just was more motivated, or if I felt motivated, or motivated enough, then I finally would get the results that I want. And while motivation is important, and even willpower is important, one of the main things they really try to emphasize in the book Change Anything is that it's nowhere near as important as these what they call 6 sources of influence that are always working either with us or against us when it comes to getting the results that we really want. Now, what you're going to see about these sources of influence is that they all, if implemented the right way, they all lead to one thing, though, that's really the key to getting really good results. And it's this one thing that almost every one of us, if we're not getting the results that we want, this is the one thing that we're lacking. And that is consistency. Because, think about it. It's like we can all eat 2 or 3 healthy meals, in a day or in a week. We can work out, for a period of time and do really good at it consistently. But then what happens is where we tend to fall off track, or we never really reach our goal, is we just don't do it consistently enough, right? Because 3 healthy meals a week, or even 3 healthy meals a day, you do that just once in a while, isn't really going to do it, right? It's got to be something that you do kind of all the time, and that's the part where most people struggle with. Because, like I said, it's pretty easy to do those things once in a while. So that means that all 6 of these sources of influence can help us increase our consistency when they're working for us rather than when they're working against us. Now, that's one of the other things they really emphasize in the book, is that whether you're aware of these things or not, they're already there. They're already doing what they're doing. They're already either influencing you in a negative way, or maybe potentially helping influence you in a positive way. So one of the first steps to really improving these things is just become aware of what they are, and how are they, examine your own life and say, are these things actually helping me, or are they making things worse? And then you can come up with specific strategies as to how can I get these things working for me rather than against me. So I'll give you some examples here in a second. So one of the first is actually, like we already mentioned, personal motivation. So if you don't want to do it, right, then you're not going to do it, right? So it does have to be something that you personally desire, or that you want. And so there are different things that we can do to increase our motivation. Challenges, rewards, having people that hold us accountable, things like that. But one of the things that they use in the book, one of the statements they make is people who elicit real change have figured out how to make the undesirable desirable. Now, think about that for a second. When they say undesirable, desirable, a lot of times the things that help us, now I'm speaking in the context of weight loss and health and fitness, not necessarily, because you could apply this to a lot of other things in life too, but just from the context of health and fitness, a lot of times the things that I know people I talk with about, starting a class or whatever, a lot of times they're like, I don't like to exercise, or I don't like to sweat, or I don't like vegetables. And you think about a lot of the things that are really making them not get great results, is there are things that they find undesirable that they just don't want to do. How can you get somebody to enjoy eating vegetables? How can you get someone to enjoy exercising? Now, initially, it may not. A lot of times, if you start eating healthy and you're exercising, you find it's very rewarding, right? You find out that you like how you feel, you like how your clothes fit, you feel more self-confident. Maybe you're health-wise, you're feeling just overall better, more energy. Those are all rewards in and of themselves. But sometimes when you're first starting, you have to figure out other things too. Like, for example, making it fun, making it a game, coming up with challenges, rewards, things like this that can help people to feel more personally motivated to work toward their particular goal and to essentially be more consistent. Ability has to do with not just like, do I enjoy it, do I want to do it, but am I able to actually do it? Do I have the skills, do I have the knowledge, do I know how to implement the types of, in the book, the term they'll use are called vital behaviors. Vital behaviors are, when they say vital, they mean like if you're trying to reach a particular goal, then it makes sense that you would study the behaviors of the people who have already done it. So in the case of, like, say, weight loss, rather than studying just what people do to lose weight, we should also study people who have lost weight and keep it off, right? Because that's what we really want to do, right? I mean, because if we start, imagine if you just all you do is study people who rapid fat loss, but then all of those people that you researched, you find them a year later and they've all gained, all of it back plus some. Well, what's the point of following that protocol? Yeah, it might be good at getting the weight off, but it doesn't do very good at keeping the weight off, right? So we need to study the behaviors of people who keep weight off. What do they do? So, for example, we can look at people who participate in the National Weight Control Registry. These are subjects who, on average, have lost over 55 pounds and have kept it off for many, many years. And they run all these statistics on these people to find out what do they all have in common. And there are these commonalities, and you can look at those and say, man, how many of these things apply to me? So, for example, one commonality is they all, well, I shouldn't say all, I think it's like 90 plus, I forget what the actual percentage, but I know it's in the 90%, is a little over 90% of the participants in the National Weight Control Registry exercise an hour a day. So in fact, they not only looked at the hour per day, but they even quantified the number of calories they burn over the course of a week. And so they found that they're essentially doing a lot of exercise. The vast majority of them are to keep the weight off. So that's pretty interesting. The vast majority have modified their diet, and it's again close to 90% are following a low-calorie, lower-fat approach, whereas only about 10% are doing more like the low-carb, higher-fat diet. So we see the statistics tend to gear toward the people who are eating like that lower-fat diet. And these are just two of the many statistics they look at. They look at everything from TV watching to motivation to what foods do you restrict versus which foods don't you restrict, and so on. And you get a lot of data that's really helpful when you come up with your own, program. One last one from the National Weight Control Registry is the vast majority of participants weigh themselves frequently. So, so right away, people say, why do you guys have to weigh in every time you're here? It's like, well, because we know that people who are most successful at keeping weight off, they don't wait a week or a month or a year to weigh themselves. They do it pretty frequently because the minute they see that scale starting to bump up, it gives them that awareness to say, oh man, I'm starting to get off track here. I better figure out what the heck I'm doing wrong here and get back on track. The people who don't want to ever get on the scale are the ones who are kind of in denial. Sort of like driving down a dangerous road with all these little warning signs, but you just decided I'm not gonna look at those things because I don't really want to know about the danger, because that's going to stress me out. Yeah, it's stressful, but then you also end up driving over the edge of the cliff, right? So you have to look at the warning signs early so you can make those adjustments to keep you on track. Social support, motivation, encouragement. I'm going to actually link this back into the National Weight Control Registry. Roughly 52%, which is a little more than half, of the participants in the registry lost weight and keep it off with the help of some type of program. So they found that just kind of doing it on their own wasn't quite, it didn't really work for the vast majority. Now, another interesting fact about that statistic was they found that the vast majority of those, that 52% who were doing it with the help of a program, were mostly female. And the ones who were doing it more solo were mostly male. So that's kind of interesting to say that now not all guys did it by themselves, but it does seem to be something about the group dynamic, particularly with females, that seems to really be motivating and helpful with helping lose weight and keep it off. And we know that just the science itself, we find that when you quote unquote harness the peer pressure, there's all sorts of fascinating research on peer pressure and its impact on positively on being able to help us with weight loss. Sometimes, for example, just seeing somebody else in a class or a group dynamic who's gotten good results is motivating for other people, but they often, we tend to, whether we don't want to admit it or not, we tend to be a little competitive with other people around us, right? So if you find out Becky lost 5 pounds, you're like, oh, dang it, I could lose 5 pounds too. I'm as good as Becky, And so we can kind of harness that peer pressure in a positive way to help us get better results. Social skills and resources, this kind of has to do along the line of not just the people motivate you, but it has to do with someone who's like a teacher or a coach or a trainer a lot of the people who are, going through life, without some sort of like mentor or guidance, again, they're kind of doing it on their own, tend to struggle a bit more than those who have got someone in their life who's kind of helping to steer them in the right direction. Environment, this one's huge. This is probably one of the most important of the 6. If we talk about our space, the cues and triggers, there's a book called, this has changed anything, but another book called Tiny Habits from the authors from Stanford. And he talks about the same thing in another book I'll just reference is by Dr. David Kessler called The End of Overeating. And they all kind of go into this idea about cues and triggers, meaning that there are things in our environment and our space that tend to either push us toward making good choices versus bad choices. So for example, one study looked at office workers and what they did in this study was they put little bowls of candy like chocolates on their desk. And then in another group, they put the same bowls of chocolates, but just put them 6 feet away. And they found that those who had the chocolates 6 feet away, I can't remember the exact amount percentage-wise, but it was a significant difference in how much chocolate was consumed in those who had it right on the desk versus those who had it just 6 feet away. Because at 6 feet away, you had to actually get up out of your desk, walk over just a few steps to get your chocolates versus just being able to reach and grab while they're right there in your environment. So environment is not just related to as far as food and its presence, but marketing, even another interesting study I read was looking at clutter. So looking at kitchens, and they found that people who were eating and preparing meals in a cluttered kitchen were more likely to make poor eating choices than those who are eating in like a very organized, clean kitchen. So there's something about just when your environment feels sort of like organized and less cluttered and just neat, that you tend to make more rational choices and less emotional ones. And you think about it, when you're in a chaotic environment, it's kind of stressful. So it tends to lead toward more emotionally based decisions, which tend to oftentimes not be the greatest, right? So we're tending to, choose the junk. If you come home and in your environment is, convenient food that's bad for you, then it's going to be, think about it, it makes sense, you're going to want to gravitate towards those things. But if you make it difficult, strategically you say, because one of the things that when it comes to ability that they talk about is another in the book Change Anything is being a student of yourself. And they're saying you have to learn your own patterns, your own struggles, because everybody's a bit different. And so you have to look at you have to know, some people it's binging, some people it's frequent snacking, some people it's alcohol, some people it's, hey, I do good all week, but then I go out on the weekend and I blow it. Everybody's got their little thing, but you have to know what your thing or things are before you can come up with a strategy that's going to help you, right? So when it comes to environment, like I said, it's different for everybody. Some of you are like, yeah, I always keep chips in the house, or yeah, I always have I joke with my dad because he growing up, he always had the mint chocolate chip ice cream and those little long cookies with a little cream in the middle. We joke about it because those are like my dad's little he had to have those things like almost every night, and it was like you do that consistently enough, right? And that one little thing can really add up over time. So finally, design rewards and demand accountability. So we want to keep the motivation going, and we want to, in order to help motivate us and keep us on track, we want not only to have rewards as far as for when you do well, but you want to find somebody or some way to demand accountability. Now, what I mean by demand accountability, we already do this. Like I said, these things are already working in our lives in some form or another. So take demanding accountability. We do this all the time with things like contracts, where you do a marriage, a loan, buying a house, all these things. You sign contracts and you make contracts and deals with people because the idea is these social structures are in place to try to make it so that when the going gets rough and we want to give up and we want to say, I don't want this car anymore, I don't want to be in this person's a jerk, I don't want to be married to them anymore. It's hard to sort of just back out. We've set up social structures that make it, so there's some pressure there to try to help us stay on track, right? And so we can use that same strategy when it comes to our own results to say, how can I make myself more, have to have more accountability? Sometimes it comes back to, a coach, a spouse, a friend, figuring out how to do that. That also leads into, for example, when it comes to like social support and motivation, sometimes you have to have a conversation with someone who, take for example, I know like my wife and I, we used to like to get treats for each other a lot of times when you were getting a gift. Rather than buying like a necklace or something like this, it'd be like a brownie or a cupcake or, and then we would kind of be like, why do we keep like sabotaging each other with like chocolate and stuff like this? We're both trying to stop eating this stuff, and yet then all we keep doing is buying that for that person whenever you're going to get a special treat, and it's like you want to thank the person, but then you also are a little bit irritated because you're like, I don't want to eat that stuff. Stop buying that for me. So rather than just be a jerk and say don't buy me chocolate anymore, you could just go say, hey, I really appreciate you have a conversation with that person, right? If you recognize it as an issue, you go talk to them and you say, hey, I really appreciate you get me these. I appreciate the thought, but I'm really trying to work on my health and this and that. And I was wondering if it's possible, if you do want to ever get me something nice, here are some other alternatives I would love. If you ever looking around and you want to just get a special treat or something. And that's a way that you can have a conversation that can lead to something that's going to now help you down the road with being more consistent. So anyways, that is if you want to read more or check it out more in depth, the book is called Change Anything by Joseph Grenny. Great. There's actually a whole chapter in the book specifically just on weight loss. Have a good night.
You're welcome.